with Notes on Iowa, and today we're talking about part 2, day 3 of my 2021 walk across Iowa to follow the path of the 1835 Iowa Dragoons. And on part 2, day 3, I went from downtown Des Moines, the site of Second Fort Des Moines, which I talked about in the video and the article for part 2, day 2. And headed all the way up the Neil Smith Trail, out past Saylorville, towards Big Creek State Park, which this is the longest day of the expedition. It was perhaps the hottest day of my 2021 travels, and certainly a memorable one. So come along with me as we take a look at part 2, day 3. So on part 2, day 2, I got started in downtown Des Moines, heading just across the river initially up to the Botanical Gardens, or the Greater Botanical Center of Iowa, which is really a wonderful facility. I know many times I'd like to go there in the winter. My wife, who's very interested in plants, both here in terms of domestic plants, but as well as gardening and some of those kind of things, spends a lot of time there and can spend hours going through all the different plants. Great resource, great indoor facility for in the winter, maybe if you're trying to get outside. Also, incredible gardens they've worked on over the past few years to expand. But from there, I headed up and was determined to get out of Des Moines. It's funny how on a thing like this, you're constantly looking forward. And one of the first things I came across the Neil Smith Trail was the Birdland Park and Marina. I thought this was interesting, a collection of boats, including houseboats and some other just kind of sizable watercraft for the river compared to other things I've seen. Also, the largest collection of geese in one family unit I've seen. Looked like maybe some adopted geese there. And then a Forester travel trailer as well, which I work in Forest City at Waldorf University, and I really liked seeing that. They were an early manufacturer similar to Winnebago Industries. Also eventually came upon North High School, kind of popped out of the woods and found myself at North, which was pretty interesting. I'm used to taking 6th Avenue up in Des Moines through a very densely populated part of the city and arriving at North High School, and kind of confused me when I popped out of there and all of a sudden, there I was. But this speaks to how the city has built itself around the river to mitigate some of the potential risk posed by spring flooding and some of those other concerns. And you can see on the Neil Smith Trail, which is about 27 miles stretching from downtown Des Moines all the way up past Saylorville, what kind of the city's done to protect itself. Could see some damage from the derecho. Saw some an old railway bridge was now converted to a pedestrian and bike bridge, and many people were taking that route. I couldn't figure out why so many people were crossing over there, and I headed on to the Ding Dartling Greenway myself, headed north, and eventually crossed a bridge and started to see these signs that said road closed ahead or trail closed ahead, which did cause me a little bit of concern. Eventually, it really would come to bear on my travels for the day as I had headed north. As I was going, it was getting really hot. The heat index was over 100 on this day, which, as I mentioned before, is the longest day of my entire walk across Iowa. And so as I packed about 10, 12 miles in, I finally reached 8035, where the trail was closed due to construction. I had to do some creative workaround to maybe get through there. It was a Saturday morning, so no one was working. Looks like many people have kind of found a way to skirt through there. But I arrived on the other side, eventually put the drone up on a sandbar in the middle of the Des Moines River. And one of the things that's really interesting, you're going to see here in the footage, is a bunch of mud swallows. As soon as I get the drone up to about 20, 25, 30 feet, meters in the air, they will just go nuts if I'm too close to a bridge. They will come out, they'll immediately view it as a predator. They start to swarm all around the camera, kind of making sure that they're defending their territory. And this was maybe the most intense they got. It kind of looks a little Alfred Hitchcocky here if we're taking a look at the footage. But no harm, no foul. They don't actually touch the drone. They'll keep their distance, but they kind of come out in a swarm and really go around there, which I thought was pretty interesting. Eventually, I put it back down after a little bit of a break. I had to coax myself off the river because it's just a nice place to relax. There's people fishing, taking advantage of the nice day, but it was still pretty early, and I continued to head north. A lot of bike traffic on the Neil Smith Trail and out towards Saylorville, people getting ready for RAGBRAI, which is the Register's annual great bike ride across Iowa. I was still on the path of the Dragoons as I made it out there, and we can see that Des Moines has really changed, and maybe just kind of the area surrounding the kind of Saylorville Lake. Similar to what we saw with Lake Red Rock, we can see here on the map what the river looked like and the township looked like prior to the construction of the dam. And the Saylorville Dam is actually built. It's approved in the 1950s, built in the 1960s, opened in the 1970s. And as the Saylorville Dam is built, this provides a great ability when paired with the Red Rock Dam, which also opened in the late 1960s, for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to control not only the Des Moines River, but also the amount of water being dumped into the Mississippi River. And so when the gates are open and the reservoir is allowed to run out of the gates, we can see that a lot of water can pass through it in a short amount of time. But also in a drought year or a year where we're not getting a ton of rainfall like this year it's been so far, you can shut those gates down, maybe build up the reservoir a little bit more, which will allow for monitoring and control the river. So I continued on through the next morning. Before I got started, I stepped out and took some great photos as the sun was coming up at the Saylorville Dam pretty early on the backside. But on the day I was walking through, there's all sorts of people out and about, not just bicyclists, also people out walking, a lot of friendly dogs. And eventually I made it up towards Polk City. And making it up past the Saylorville Marina to Polk City, and then eventually passing on towards Big Rock, or Big Creek State Park, excuse me, was able to see just a lot of different people out enjoying the day. I couldn't help but think about how these little communities had changed with the building of the Saylorville Dam. All sorts of natural life out there. The Red Feather Prairie was somewhere I passed through on my way to Polk City, and thought about how a lot of the businesses derive a lot of commercial dollars from the revenue provided by Saylorville Lake. Also, Big Creek has its own spillway and dam just a couple miles north of Polk City that helps to maintain their flood risk from Big Creek, which again shows kind of how people in Iowa are working to help offset the threat from the environment as they kind of face the different environmental challenges that come with living by a river in an area of the country that gets pretty steady rainfall in most years. Also saw some wildlife throughout the day. Most notable was a big group of pelicans. They were just under the spillway at Big Creek where they kept drifting out further into the lake. And then eventually when they got too far, they would all lift up into the air and fly back towards the spillway and then repeat the process again and again. Watch them for a while. Allegedly, if you go out there in the fall, you can see them blanket all of the water. So part 2, day 3, longest day in terms of distance, and one of the hottest days in terms of temperature. So a pretty challenging day all around, but a beautiful day to make my way through Des Moines, almost all the way up and out of Polk County and towards Boone County, which will be in our part 2, day 4, articles and videos that are released the next couple of days. I appreciate you coming along with me on the 2021 walk across Iowa to follow the 1835 Iowa Dragoons. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate any insights you can provide. People make this project better every day, and I'm glad that you've chosen to take a look at the project. Thanks.
There's a lot of good history about Iowa a lot of people don't even know about.